right. Well, good morning. Thanks for joining us, guys. We have two leaders here from STO Building Group. We're joined here with Michael Dugan. And Mike Dugan is our Director of IT for STO Building Group. And Steve Neeson, who is our SVP of Tech Ops. We should want to talk maybe a little bit more about what that means at STO Building Group.
That's a good question.
Yeah. Just to quickly introduce myself, my name is Steve Cangiano. I'm the Chief Product Officer for CMiC. So, we got a couple of big topic questions that we could ask and definitely go into a lot of detail about. But, just kind of interested, kind of get things warmed up and also just learn a little bit more about what you're up to. I'll kind of do an open-ended question. Steve, what are you most excited about right now over the next 2-3 weeks in your focus or your world?
2 to 3 weeks?
Yeah.
That's not very far.
I know. That's why I'm just curious.
That goes pretty quick. I think we think more along 3 to 6 months.
Yeah.
But in the short range, I think it's really about getting more of our colleagues tuned into what's available to them in any given time. So if they have project pursuits that are coming up, which is, every day there's a new project pursuit coming up, and what kind of things can we deploy for any particular project team that could make a difference in helping them win that pursuit, right? Or what they could potentially deploy on a project that would help them be more effective. Mm-hmm. And, sometimes it's technology, sometimes it's the best practices that we share across our organization. But I'd say that's one of the things that we do day in, day out, week in, week out. And
what have you found that's worked well to achieve some of those things? I mean, STOBG is such a large organization now and will probably continue to grow really rapidly. What are the types of things that you're doing, as the SVP of Tech Ops to make sure that people know, what are the tools available to me? Where do I go if I need help or I need to get some best practice information? How do you accomplish that?
As a relatively new group, I think we do a lot of reach out. So making sure that people know where to go for resources. And we're obviously connected with the IT team, so we're inextricably linked with technology and the products and how we get support to people. And I think just getting that message out has been a big effort, and to let them know, hey, there is a place to come if you're looking for help or assistance, or just understanding, hey, what can I work with? Mm-hmm. And most of that is we've set up our own intranet webpage so that people can go there, check out the landing page, what's available to them. We've done some live webinars over the last year and a half, connected with Mike, myself, and the rest of our tech ops and IT teams. So I think we're doing more reaching out, but I think it's starting to pay off where people are really starting to get connected and say, hey, did you hear about? So I think just that word of mouth across different, to your point, different geographies, different offices, and different people. So.
Do you have a point of doing I don't know if you want to call it a lunch and learn or a weekly webinar, a monthly webinar? Do you guys have a certain cadence of how you want to disseminate kind of those standards, those tools out to the team, or is it basically an ad hoc thing?
We have some structured calls with a group we call our technical operations champions. So they're representative of all the different family of companies. So we get together once every 2 weeks with them on a quick call, just to talk about what drivers are going on, what needs they might have, and trying to get connected with them and find out what they're struggling with.
Cool, that's great. So Mike, same question to you, so I'll just repeat it though. So, what are you focused on? What are you excited about in the next couple of weeks? I know it's a short term, but I find it's a bit of an interesting answer when you think more short term in this case.
Yes. So we have, I guess technically it's 4 weeks. 3.5.
Okay, we'll go 4 weeks. That's fine.
But we have a fairly significant milestone in one of the big projects that I'm working on, which is kind of bringing together of multiple of our companies in terms of software and business practice.
Okay.
And so we're kind of having one of the preliminary in-person gatherings. We're all flying out to Salt Lake City.
Nice.
And we'll be doing a lot of early validations and testing and some of that real fun, hands-on team working together.
Cool.
So that's a big milestone.
And I have a little bit of an inside track on that. So that's what STOBG is calling the Convergence Project.
Yes.
I mean, sometimes the name of a project is important, right? Because
Yep.
everyone kind of gets behind the name and
Yep.
it sticks. So that's exciting. And what are some of the reasons that you guys are all coming together? What's motivating the Convergence Project to happen at STOBG?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think it has to do with finding the balance that STOBG is really offering as the power of our platform, by being able to kind of come together and find best practices across all of our unique brands and the different companies that make up STO Building Group. We're able to kind of learn from all the different local experience that the different builders have and bring that to the table and use kind of a converged environment supported by the same backbone, supported by the same best practices, supported by the same technical infrastructure in order to kind of optimize those synergies without taking away from the local individual practices and the way that people can collaborate. By having that kind of process and software backbone, you're able to get a level of consistency without kind of getting rid of the unique processes and the unique ways that people do business.
Okay. And what are some of the tools you're using to kind of facilitate that platform? You got probably a lot of different components that you're trying to merge together. What are some of the tools you're using?
Yeah, so I mean, CMiC is kind of the primary tool there. But within that, we've got, mobile applications, Construct PM, we've got financial and payroll components, and then there's lots of other pieces from a software perspective that feed into it, as well as just kind of business practice and guidelines. I think Steve can talk about that because that's another simultaneous effort that we've done, is converging our business. It's really a lot about business practice and best practices, and then we support that with technology as opposed to letting the technology drive the practice. Because when you do it that way, people are resistant, people don't embrace it because it doesn't match, and then it's a chore to use the technology as opposed to, this is how I do business. Oh, great, here's a tool that helps me to execute what I do, as opposed to the other way around. So
one of the one of the tremendous efforts, it's probably Mike's sort of underestimating the sort of gathering efforts here, is you've got all the different organizations represented. You got everybody working together, and to really unpack business practices, how our platform supports those business practices has been a tremendous effort. So we've also taken the time to really challenge our business processes. Hey, are they the most efficient? Is that the most effective? Even things like workflow. Are we doing things in a way that's really effective, helps our teams do things faster, easier, right, and more consistently across the platform? So I think those types of things, when you think about, hey, we're getting things together and putting them in a more harmonized fashion, the benefits of that are immeasurable. The challenges are great, right? So you have to get alignment. You want people to agree on, hey, this is really the best way to do things. So there have been some things from, the structure tone legacy companies, right, that everybody knows here in the Northeast, right, and then the latent companies, that joined in 2019, right, and you're sort of putting these two pieces together of saying, hey, what's the best way to do things? So we've taken the best of both worlds and we're able to merge them together. That's no easy task.
I was going to say, it's for sure easier said than done.
Easier
It
said
sounds
than
great in a podcast or a presentation, but to actually get it out of the
a lot of
field
sweat
and do
equity.
it, oh man, a lot of patience too.
Yes.
And understanding. So I'm curious, I can maybe ask this question for both of you if you have different answers, but can you give me an example of something that maybe you were surprised about that ended up happening and becoming a new standard across STOBG as a result of that exercise, right? Maybe there's a smaller organization that's joined STOBG that was doing something really cool that we're like, oh wow, that's a really great way to approach something. We should do that nationwide across our entire group. Are there examples like that you can think of?
I'll let you tackle that first, just from a system structure perspective.
Yeah, I think probably one of the biggest examples is just how different companies look at kind of forecasting risk on a project, every company has a different approach. Like everybody's trying to solve the same challenges, and I wouldn't say that there's kind of one company or one
Or
group.
maybe one approach that was surprising. They were like, oh, wow, that's actually really innovative, or that was kind of out of the box thinking. Anything that jumps out at you?
I'm trying to think of a good example.
I don't know if there's any aha moment in this. I think it's really, the organic piece of what are we used to doing? What's everybody acclimating to? I would maybe say the surprise is how going through a design process and getting alignment across, or consensus. I would say that was maybe a little bit smoother transition than maybe the management team, thought about. Like, is that really going to be friction? Are we going to? So, like a good example might be the workflow challenge, right? And you know this from platforms, right? If you create crazy workflow, it feels like a burden, and you want to undo that, right? Well, taking the time to say, hey, does that workflow actually work for everybody? And say, maybe it works here, maybe it doesn't work here, and getting people behind that to say, hey, all right, we agree that workflow is necessary, and we agree that there should be a harmonized method of the workflow and maybe appropriate checks and balances. And we're all in on, let's create something that works for everybody.
Yeah.
So I think that was a little bit aha, that like, hey, we can actually find commonality here that makes sense for everybody, and then move through, how many, work groups that we created. So I think just that synergy and that dynamic was really, really cool to see.
And maybe is it as simple as it could be, right? Like, you always have these workflows that get really, really large over time for good reason. And there's always a story. We always say that even internally. There's always a story about why this was the way it was. We just maybe don't know what it was anymore, but we know there was a story. And maybe to kind of say like, hey, we have this out here. It doesn't have to be this way. Could we simplify things? And then maybe, to your point, like as STOBG and more organizations are joining STOBG, to have them feel like they're a part of building that workflow and a part of making those decisions, and under that convergence project, getting them to buy in culturally to how the organization is going to work.
Yeah, and I would add the one thing that I think has been really great from this perspective is that the different companies that have coming to the table here are bringing just different focus. So the structure tone companies, I'll just use the example of collaboration in CMiC, working with outside parties in our software to get the most out of that collaboration. The structure tone companies were very focused on design team collaboration. So architects, engineers, consultants logging in, collaborating on submittals, RFIs, and we've had a lot of success with that. On the latent companies, we're much more focused on collaborating with subcontractors.
In the field,
bringing subcontractors on board into their platform, doing safety checklists. And so we both have expertise in different areas. And bringing that together now, it's really just, we don't have to pick one or the other. It's more combining them and getting those. And that's just one example. There's been many areas where, whether it's BCCI with their punch list program, or different companies that come forward, Ajax with contract forecasting, they bring a particular focus or passion that they've invested heavily into, and we're able to, you don't have to pick one thing or the other.
And there's the experience there too, right? So like Leighton will bring some experience, say, hey, the persona of a sub, doing checklists in the field is a very different persona than an architect approving a submittal in an office. Right? And they're both important, but to have that real experience of saying, hey, this worked really well, this didn't. Like, I know, Leighton's doing some interesting things with Domo and dashboarding reporting to get engagement in the process of doing some of those types of things, like filling the checklist. Oh, I saw that it was done on the dashboard. Great. So I've even seen on the vendor side some of those questions come up, like, hey, oh, my checklist wasn't done. I need to make sure that it's published because there's a dashboard on my job site that everyone sees in terms of people doing their tasks. So I thought that was pretty cool as like a lesson learned there of like getting people to buy in that may not otherwise be as bought in by kind of, opening up the doors a little bit to say, hey, this is what we're doing on the project. Here's how everyone's participating towards something bigger, right? So yeah, that's all really good stuff. I mean, you can talk about those types of things for quite a while. I have a
We
kind of
talk
a
all day about that.
yeah, I know we probably will, but there's a couple of areas I want to jump into a little bit. I mean, this one's a very broad question, but what do you foresee are like kind of the biggest industry trends within construction or construction technology? Both are fine. Over the next 12 to 24 months, right? And what are some of the biggest trends? I'm sure AI is going to be mentioned in there a little bit, but it can be anything. It could be VDC advances, things going on with AI, relation to labor and the way that we're going to attract more young people into the industry. What are some of the biggest changes you're seeing in the industry? I'll start with you, Steve. Anything that comes to mind when I ask that question?
Yeah, I think I think one of the really impressive, things that we could predict is I call it the intersection of BIM and reality capture. Mm-hmm. They're gonna eventually meet up, right? You see all the tremendous things that are happening with reality capture, progress measurement, right, and the connectivity to how can we get external parties involved in projects even though they might be remote. And so that stems from, hey, we got to share this information. Now you've got robotics that are involved in capturing, that, and then now you've got powerful software platforms that can ingest that data and make sense of it. So we'll talk about the AI segment of that a little bit later, right? But a funny thing is, like, this is how long I've been doing this, 37 years. So in 1999, right, we were doing 3D, 4D building, right? And everybody figured BIM technology was going to take over, right? Paper drawings would go away, 2D would disappear. And here we are 25 years later, still at the next revelation of, hey, the technology's catching up, the BIM is more mobile, it's portable, it's more accessible, more people are familiar with it. So the idea that they're going to intersect and that the model becomes the continuity of how projects get executed, not just a handoff from a design perspective and then we convert it to 2D coordination and then we build it and then we go back to reality capture. Somewhere you're going to see those things connect at some point. Yeah, and I think that's really exciting because I think it's really a short horizon.
And what do you think is changed more recently that's made that more possible?
Certainly the technology and the leveraging of AI, and for the construction side to catch up to the leveraging of like generative AI for design teams and the optioning and alternate considerations for design possibilities. You've got to connect with that, and the idea that you could resource load is going to become a tremendous demand, right? Yeah. So the money, the labor hours, and all these things that connect to how do we make the job successful. And look, we're all trying to find predictive outcomes, right? So how do we know where we're going to go? And if you have multiple sources of where that information resides, trying to put that together in one place for sort of seamless analytics has yet to really sort of surface. There's lots of folks out there trying to connect those dots. Yeah. But I think we'd like to connect those dots for ourselves, as the builder in the center of this whole stream. Is we're taking the design, we're collaborating at the front end, over here on the left with the customer, and then we're collaborating over here on the right with the handoff to the customer and the use of that facility. So in the middle has always been these transitions between digitized, analog, back to digitized. Yeah. I'd love to see it just sort of stay in the digitized world.
And what is SCOBG's strategy to try and stay as current or take advantage of these tools as much as possible? Is it just making sure that we have the right vendors, the right partners? Is there stuff that's being done internally to try and tease out some of those ideas? Because you said something interesting, like we'd like to connect some of those dots, right? And you hear a lot more in construction technology that these, whether it's a low-code, no-code platform or just easier to use tools, that more companies are taking on some of that responsibility to solve some of their own problems. And what's SCOBG doing in that regard?
I think some basic serious investments in human capital, right? So for the first time, we actually have an organized center of excellence around VDC and BIM, right? So people from all across the family of the companies and making sure that, hey, we have a focus on how do we get more teams supported with leveraging BIM technology. So whether it's the VDC side or it's actually the BIM utilization piece, which for me leans into the construction execution side. That has been a very difficult challenge to get more people exposed to that. And I know we have something later to talk about just the challenges around resources and attracting personnel to this industry. If we don't stay high tech and we're not pushing like, hey, we're building with the coolest stuff that we could build with, which you got to admit, modeling is pretty cool,
Yeah.
right? And not just the visualization pieces, but how we actually connect to fabrication information, right, and the coordination. So all those things, attracting people and making sure that we're on the cutting edge of technology, and to invest in that kind of focus has really been a push just in, I'm going to say, considerably the last year and a half.
Yeah.
Right, and we've tried over different versions of let's press into BIM, let's be more committed to it. But generally, you fall to, does the owner really want to do it? Is it really required for this project? And we tend to shy away from, unless it's a large project and it sort of justifies the investment of it.
Yeah.
We kind of look at it in a money terms. I think we
Yeah.
have to stop doing that. I think we have to look at it for value add, and how does it actually help people be better builders?
Okay. So I mean, if the
That was a
financial-
really long thread.
No, I know, but if the financial commitment of doing BIM on a project maybe is more medium size, where to spend X number of dollars is a larger percentage of the overall budget, do you see anything that's happening right now to reduce the real financial cost of using BIM?
Yeah, I think tools that are integrating with the model and either translating that to visualize 2D or coordination, and it's all mobile and portable, right? So I think people are getting accustomed to, hey, I can look at that on my iPad and still do that. I don't need to carry a roll of
Yeah.
drawings. So I think the idea that technology is getting lighter and faster and catching up to that helps a lot.
Yeah. It's still that underlying challenge though too, right? Where you're getting 2D drawings issued from the architect, and those are my contractual documents. And I got this model that's so much more rich in data, but legally I'm still held to these 2D drawings, right?
That's right.
So I mean, that's definitely a challenge that a lot of our customers are facing. But I see, like you said, there's a lot of vendors out there that are trying to make that problem a little bit smoother and make it a little bit more feasible, that people will move more seamlessly between those two interfaces. But definitely a challenge. Now, I just to make sure, we went on a little bit of an interesting path, but Mike, just giving you a chance to answer that initial question, what are some of the biggest construction or construction technology industry trends that you're seeing or you're expecting to see over the next 24 months or so?
Yeah. I mean, I'm definitely coming at it from a technical and software perspective, but I think you touched on it a little bit, even with well, there's a couple of things. One is the kind of integration and data transfer between not just multiple platforms, but even across different parties, right? Like Steve said, as the builders, we're kind of in the center of all the different key players and stakeholders that are involved in the construction project. And I think it's, from my perspective, becoming less and less acceptable to have silos of data, have that handoff of information by humans, having to send something via email or generate a report and send it over and then re-enter it into a different system. And that was a challenge, still is a challenge that doesn't have an easy solution, because there are these different stakeholders who want and have different needs. But the kind of challenges and inefficiencies that it brings to the construction project, I find, are increasingly less and less acceptable.
Yeah.
And I think we, as the builders, have a unique challenge of a lot of times, we have to come up with a solution.
Yep.
And, integration is going to be a key part of that. Just being able to plug and play, transfer data. I think making use of data, being able to make heads or tails of unstructured data, right? Like being able to extract value from that and get meaning out of it without having to fill out forms in a detail.
Not having to work too hard.
Yeah,
Right? Not
yeah.
having to work too
So
hard.
that's where, to me, the technology, everybody has expectations that technology can solve problems.
Yep.
And it can in a lot of ways, but it's not going to solve the problem of different requirements that people have professionally and contractually, that their roles are in a construction project. But where technology can, I think, solve problems is bridging those gaps, making it easier, making it more efficient.
Yeah.
So to me, that's, if I look over the past 5 years, what trends have been building and building, I think that's one that really.
So just to double click on the integration piece, and so what is, as director of IT for SDOBG, what is your team doing to try and make that a reality, right? So you said, the ability to integrate all these different systems together, maybe to some kind of a platform to get better quality reporting out there. What are your teams doing to try and achieve that, make that a reality?
So there's a couple parts to that answer. One is that we use a low-code, no-code tool, Workato, is what we've chosen to help bridge gaps between our systems. Be able to be flexible, be able to pass data back and forth. We engage with third-party experts to bring them in where we don't have expertise in-house. So we're looking at multiple ways of being able to do that. And then the other side of that is even just organizationally, Steve from Tech Ops, me in IT, we also have a data and analytics group that Steve works very closely with, I work closely with, as well as an innovation group. So by having different groups focusing on different components of those technological challenges and working together, we're able to, I would say, balance the challenges of, okay, who's going to go out and see what's new in the marketplace and make sure that we're not behind when a new tool comes out. And that's what the innovation group is doing, right? They're looking at the new developments and keeping abreast of all the changes, latest and greatest. But at the same time, not getting distracted by every new thing that's out there. We need to also keep focus on our core data and processes and systems, which is what the IT group is doing. And then you have the data group whose challenge is, we've got data here, we've got data there, we've got different systems. How do we bring it all together, share that information, make it something that we can really benefit from and leverage that data that we have. So I think organizationally, we are dividing and conquering or focusing our specialties in different areas so that we can collaborate and find those solutions. And then technically, using the right tools, developing the right internal expertise, supplementing where necessary, partnering with vendors, CMiC, of course, being a key one, to identify what are the priorities. How can we either enhance our processes to be in a better position to be able to utilize integrations and systems, or be able to identify key points and be able to go to, a CMiC and say, like we do when we work with you guys, like, what would be really the most impactful would be to bridge these two key points. Or
even just the ability you can do that now, right? So the fact that you have tools that you're able to integrate some of those different systems together. And I like your point of, like, we want to make sure that you have the right partners in place for some strategic tasks, right? Whether it be an ERP or a point solution doing some of these things, and to kind of balance staying current and not falling behind in terms of what's out there, but also not switching every 6 months to another tool and all the disruption that's coming with that, right? So it's a bit of a tricky balance to try enough stuff, and break things and put them back together and break them again and just trying out the best methods, but then also having some of that consistency. But I guess the advantage is that you can, have some of those select vendors bolt on and put some point solutions together and switch some of them out over time, because you can do a lot of this stuff in-house now, right, with some of these low-code integration tools, and selecting vendors, I think, that have open APIs, well-documented endpoints and all that kind of stuff.
Yep. And having that backbone, and it goes back to what we were talking about with convergence, of having a standard backbone structure that supports our overall platform, or a few standard backbones. But that basic infrastructure of data that supports our platform overall is a necessary step to be able to have that flexibility of a plug-and-play integration, switch to a new point solution that solves a really specific, challenging problem, plug it into our ecosystem, our technological ecosystem, without totally upsetting the apple cart.
Yeah, it's less disruptive, right? So you have a good stable core where everybody's kind of operating in, but then we can do something really exciting and really making teams more efficient over here. But you kind of have that stable base of a platform that we can all rely on, but then we can still connect other systems in there to help those issues. Anything you want to add to that, Steve, before I move on to my next question?
Yeah, you raise a good point there. It's like the challenge is finding things that are sustainable solutions, right? So that you're not jumping, from pond to pond to pond technology. And look, the explosion in construction technology has been ridiculous, right? We're all aware and trying to avoid what we call the shiny penny syndrome, but there's a lot of awesome product development and the technology is advancing so fast. But to find a bunch of niche solutions that you have to stitch together is a tremendous amount of work. Obviously, you're trying to build a sustainable environment. So, we tend to look at it from, we're out at the front end with our innovation team looking for what's out there on the horizon. In tech ops and IT, we're deploying, testing, piloting, figuring out what works for teams, and then we're trying to find, some answer that says, hey, does that actually solve the problem for a longer range curve? And try to fit that into the suite of products that become what you're operating on. And so anything that can rise to an ERP solution or an enterprise-wide answer is really what we're in pursuit of, and it's really hard to get there.
Yeah, no, for sure. Again, this is another example of easier said than done for these types of things. But with an organization that it's as large as SCOBG, and all of these different entities that have recently joined SCOBG, as the lead in tech ops and kind of being that conduit, I'm using my own words, that conduit between IT and operations. How are you managing that, right? Because everyone's going to have a different perspective. Like, no, this tool solves my problem. No, that tool solves my problem. No, that tool solves my problem. And you want them to innovate. You want them to bring these things up. But you also want some level of prioritization of what we're focusing on improving right now as a company, and then consistency. Some sense of consistency across the company. So, like, how have you managed that, in your role, and how do you handle not stifling people's innovation, but at the same time maintaining some level of consistency, especially from a data perspective, so that SCOBG has the best visibility that it can have?
So I'll try to keep it short. So I think some of it is wrapped in our approach, right? So we have STOBG integrated technology. So we have an innovation team, right, led by a chief innovation officer. We've got a data and analytics team led by a chief data officer. We've got our CIO, for IT, and we have a tech ops leader, right? So that group of four is basically integrated to basically manage that entire process. So what we try to do is put some structure around, hey, for the 4,600 employees or so that are out there, if you found something that's interesting, right, let us know what you're interested in, because we've done a whole lot of work already. So we have a technology tracker that we can actually check and say, hey, has anybody looked at this particular product? Right? So we're trying to share that collective knowledge so that, not everybody starting with a white paper from square one is, I want to learn about that. But there's always products that come up that say, hey, we'd like to explore that. And we're trying to put some structure around that across the organization without stifling that innovation and that entrepreneurialism that makes us who we are. So that's really a fine balance. And then the challenge that has presented itself for, I'm going to say, the last 5 years is it takes a long time to go through that cycle, right? So we're trying to speed that cycle up in this engine that we've created, and we kind of call it the innovation engine, right? But it's got to go through these steps to sort of, hey, do we really proof this out enough to make sure that it works across the organization? And does it add enough value across projects that people say, hey, it resonates with us?
I'll just ask one question before we just leave the topic. I just wanted to mention that, so how are you prioritizing then, right? So you have the ability for someone to say, hey, I think this application is really cool. It's going to solve this problem for me. And I'm in an office in LA, and you guys are looking at that information. Is it the four of you that get together from an IT, data, innovations, and tech ops that get together and say, hey, these are the top 5 business problems we're trying to solve, and that's kind of how we decide where to invest our time? Or is it if someone has a great idea, even if it's not something we were talking about, we're still going to maybe invest some time in looking closer at it.
Both,
Both,
right?
yeah.
And the idea is that you want to engage the person who's out there exploring and finding stuff
Yeah.
in the solution,
Okay.
right? And even if it's captive to their locality or their job or their business unit, and it's a great idea, we want to get that shared across the platform.
Okay.
And if there's something that's not resonating, or it really doesn't sort of rise to, hey, we should share this and get more people using it, it might go into a cul-de-sac for a while until maybe it matures.
Yeah.
So, and our list is long.
I can
of
imagine.
different
It's growing even today.
different
We probably have a
applications.
few
It
today.
probably grew since we
Yeah,
sat
I
down.
think it's probably.
I was gonna say it's almost like I was gonna say two-way street, but it's almost like a three-way street where there's prioritization coming from, like a grassroots
Yeah.
local level. Hey, this would really solve this problem. There's prioritization from the business leadership side and
Yeah.
executive side, and then the third thing that we always are dealing with as well is there's a lot of priorities from the IT perspective that just come from keeping things going, keeping
Yeah.
the trains running, as we say, right? Like
Yeah.
upgrades and new releases of features and things
Yeah.
that almost drive themselves and lead to technological development and things like that.
Yeah.
So balancing the prioritization from all of those directions can definitely be a big challenge, but I think we're set up pretty well to handle it as well as we can be.
And one of the things that the group does is make sure we don't break the engine,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
So you want to vet out products. You want to make sure that we're following proper security protocols, right?
All that
And
fun
look,
stuff.
and the fourth vein where things come from is client, right?
I was just
So,
going to ask that question,
so
yeah.
clients love X, and you got to use X.
And we got to start loving X. Right?
You got to start loving X and make it happen for them.
Yeah.
And then to Mike's point, you got to support it, right? And that's the challenge is, do you have enough technical support for teams that are using all kinds of different products? And not to go back to sort of scalability of things, right? So the large projects get all the attention, all the resources, all the investment. But what about the jobs that are just churning every day, every week? Like, that's really what I'm concerned about is how do our operations teams get the best? And, it's not only if you're on the centerfold job, right? Because we're doing tons of good work, all different sizes, all different types of jobs. Everybody should have that at their discretion.
Yeah.
So.
Makes total
Well,
sense.
and part of the unique value proposition of the STOBG platform is that ability to offer the knowledge, the expertise of a whole organization, while keeping the flexibility, responsiveness of the individual companies. And I think one of the ways that I think the business teams are really good about recognizing that, right? Like if I want to get the benefits of being part of this large organization and all the resources that are there, it doesn't matter if I'm using X tool or Y. Mm-hmm. Like as long as my unique ability to meet my customers' needs and build the project is not interfere. Sure, you can tell me switch to that, and I'll tell you if there's a problem. Yeah. Right. And from my perspective, it's a lot about the standardization is a lot about juggling. If it's really a unique business scenario, a unique project type, something local about that industry or about that region, no question, we're gonna customize. We're gonna treat that challenge individually. If it's something where two companies are doing things differently just because that's the way they always did it, that's the way they always did it, then we're going to challenge them and we're going to say why, like what's unique about that. And credit to all of the brands in the STOBG, they all are totally open to that and recognize that's the power, right? So we're able to say, yeah, let's change the way we're doing things because there's not a real unique business reason for it. Mm-hmm. I like the way that you guys are doing it, so we're gonna go to that model. And I think that's a real credit to them to being open to that change to get the benefit of the large organization without sacrificing any of
Yeah.
their unique challenges.
And that's where you hope that the platforms that you've picked, right, the ERPs you've selected, the other tools you selected, allow you to do that kind of stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's, from my perspective, more as a vendor, I look at SEOBG and say, wow, if they're able to, really leverage the platforms they've established, they can scale in such an exciting way all over the country and even over the world.
Yep.
Basically rinsing and repeating what we've proven has worked in all of these different companies that you've worked with, right?